What is up, friends? Today we're going to talk about Amazon's groundbreaking new series, Undone, and as always, spoilers lie ahead. Undone was created by Kate Purdy and Raphael Bob-Waksberg, and it has instantly become one of my favorite seasons of television, period. Bob-Waksberg is obviously the creator of BoJack Horseman, and Kate Purdy just so happens to have written just about all of my favorite episodes of that show. So the idea of them teaming up to tackle a rotoscoped, time-bending murder mystery series is literally so far up my alley it isn't even funny. I was also fortunate enough to catch a PaleyFest preview of the show where we got to watch the first 2 episodes a week in advance and hear Raphael, Kate, director Hisko Hulsing, and some of the cast talk about creating the show. So I'll talk about some of my favorite insights from that panel throughout this review as well. Probably the coolest revelation at that panel was the fact that Hisko Hulsing's team of artists and rotoscopers created an oil painting for literally every single background in the series. Every one. Any background you see in the show is an actual, factual oil painting that exists somewhere, and we got to look at a bunch of them up close. They're even more gorgeous in person than they are on screen, but the fact that they're so seamlessly implemented into the rotoscope animation is astounding. Speaking of rotoscoping, I've rarely been more mesmerized by an animation style before. If you've seen movies like Waking Life or A Scanner Darkly, you're familiar with the style, but since the style is so rarely used, every time it's utilized is an opportunity to expand and improve the style. This series is no different. I think this is probably the best use of rotoscoping ever put to screen. Kate Purdy and Raphael Bob-Waksberg spoke a bit about their choice to use this style at the panel I went to, and they essentially said that they wanted the show to feel familiar and real, but also mind-bending and dreamlike. They could have filmed the show live action, but as the series includes a lot of trippy sequences where time and space are manipulated, they were worried that the use of CGI would feel disconnected from reality. As Raphael said, when you see the CGI, your mind says, oh, there's the fake part, but they wanted it all to feel seamless. By rotoscoping the actors, it elevates the visual baseline of the show and allows the trippy sequences to be implemented seamlessly. I can't say enough about Undone's visuals, but luckily the series isn't just a stylistic tour de force. The story has so much substance, and the characters just have an incredible level of depth. On top of that, the music is next level, and I've been listening to it all weekend, so check that out after you finish the show. So, with all that being said, let's jump into the series and break it down episode by episode. Here's your last chance to get out before major spoilers, and if anything I've said has sold you on this show, go watch it now before I spoil the entire thing. You can come back after you finish, I promise. Episode 1 is called The Crash and immediately starts with the inciting incident of the entire series. We see our main character Alma, played by Rosa Salazar, driving recklessly in an upset state. She appears to see something shocking before getting in a horrible car crash, and as she sits in her car bleeding, we jump back in time to see the events leading up to the car crash. We get a voiceover of Alma lamenting over how bored she is with her life. We learn that she lives with her boyfriend and is hearing impaired using a hearing aid. This also gives us a lot of insight into her state of mind and general outlook towards life. We see that the voiceover was Alma talking to her little sister Becca at a bar, who reveals that she's getting married, much to Alma's disgust. This opening sequence is a real masterclass in establishing character. We learn so much about Alma so quickly and effectively. Any aspiring writer should seriously take note of this. We also importantly learn that Alma and Becca's dad died when they were young. Alma drunkenly arrives home after the night out at the bar and has a bit of an existential crisis to her boyfriend Sam, lamenting the idea of settling down and having kids. Alma works at a daycare with another character, Tunde, played by David Diggs. Alma sits down with a misbehaving kid named Cassie and tells her a story that foreshadows some of the themes and ideas played with throughout the series. She tells her about a Colombian tribe that put their babies in a dark cave for 9 years and only describe the outside world to them, don't show it to them. When those kids eventually see the real world for the first time, they have massive respect and admiration for life itself. We'll see later in the show that Alma starts to experience the world in new ways through senses she didn't know she had, which parallels this story. Next, we meet Alma's mother and learn that she's religious and also pretty critical of Alma's life choices. Alma finds a picture of her dad smoking and is surprised to learn that he smoked, and begins to ask questions about the accident that led to his death. Alma and Sam head to an engagement party for Becca and her fiance Reed, which leads Rosa further into existential crisis. She breaks up with Sam after the party. Alma and Becca talk it over at the bar, and we learn one more crucial piece of information for the series. Alma and Becca's paternal grandmother was schizophrenic. The two of them get plastered with the bartender and end up drunkenly playing Truth or Dare in Alma's now empty house, and Becca ends up hooking up with the bartender. The next day, Becca shows up to church late and gets in a huge fight with Alma over the events of the prior evening. Alma says one of my favorite lines in the episode, yelling at Becca that we're broken people and broken people break people. It explains a lot of her fears over living a normal, settled down life. This conversation leads Alma to her breakdown that we saw at the beginning of the episode, and we once again see the events of her car crash unfold, but we also learn that moments prior to the accident, Alma sees her father appear out of thin air on the side of the road. I also think it's worth noting that he's smoking a cigarette in the exact same way he was in the photo that Alma found earlier in the episode. This first episode is so jam-packed with information and character development, and perfectly escalates the mystery and intrigue moving into episode 2, which is titled The Hospital. Alma wakes up in a hospital bed and immediately sees her dad sitting next to her reading a newspaper. We also get a flashback to Halloween when Alma was a child, and we get a pretty cute scene between Alma, Becca, and their dad, Jacob. Oh yeah, Jacob is also played by Bob-Waksberg, who is incredible, and I love him. This is when we get our first glimpse of just how trippy and mind-bending this show can actually get, as young Alma's background shatters into space and places her back in the hospital bed, where she sees Becca and her mother. One of my favorite little details the series showcases is that everything is silent when Alma isn't wearing her hearing aid. We flash back again to Alma on Halloween night, and she goes back out for more candy with her father. He tells her a story that once again parallels some of the themes and ideas Alma is presented with over the course of the show. Alma is dressed up as Dorothy, and Jacob explains why he never understood the story of the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy is transported to a magical, mystical place and given an opportunity to do something amazing, but all she wants to do is go home. We'll soon see Alma presented with a similar opportunity. Jacob answers his cell phone and goes into a panic, leaving Alma on the street while he goes to answer the work emergency. The show is kind of hard to write and talk about since all of the events of the show happen out of order. That's kind of part of the premise, but this episode lays out the new rules of Alma's perceptions really well. We see certain events unfold in a different order, we see other events unfold repeatedly with different results, and we establish Alma's new relationship with her visions and dreams of her father. We also learn that Alma was in a coma for multiple weeks following the accident, and that she forgot that she broke up with Sam. One of my favorite scenes in the episode is Alma sitting down and talking to her father Jacob, working out what's happening to her. Jacob asks Alma for help before the world reverts back to an earlier set of events that we've actually already seen when Alma wakes up and talks to her mother. Alma reacts pretty aggressively during both of these retellings of the event, upsetting her mother and sister. She freaks out at Becca and once more breaks through into a mind-bending space setting and is forced to run through a weird disjointed time loop. Describing all this stuff barely gets the idea across, you really just have to see it, but effectively Alma needs to learn and understand how to navigate her new non-linear perception of time. She sits down with her dad and asks if she's losing her mind, like his mother, and I think the fact that she wondered this immediately is pretty important. But Jacob tells Alma that because of what's happening to her brain, she can see more, do more, and sense more with her mind than others, and that they have to help develop her potential. Alma continues to revert back to the same events we've seen unfold differently as she wakes up from her coma, which continues to disorient her. She tries to focus her mind and is able to actually bring herself to the future weeks after she leaves the hospital. It's actually a scene that we won't see again until multiple episodes later, I believe in episode 5, after she learns that Sam lied to her about their breakup. She once again reverts back to the hospital, and her father tells her she needs to ease into the time manipulation. He also tells her that he caused her accident because he needed her to wake up and help him investigate, solve, and change the events of his death. Alma wakes up in the hospital one last time, and this time the events play out very differently. She reacts to her mother and sister's concerns in a calm and understanding way for the very first time. Her father congratulates her and she confronts him for abandoning her. We see major moments in her life, her childhood, her graduation. We see a suicide attempt. I think these resentments are an important key to what is happening to Alma depending on how you view the events of the series. She resents her father for leaving her and effectively abandoning her. Whether or not she's actually seeing her real father throughout the series will continue to be debated, but I think if Alma is actually just losing her mind, then what her father is asking her to do makes complete sense. This is a deeply rooted resentment, and she could basically be hallucinating an opportunity to go back and solve the problem. She feels like the events of Halloween when she was younger broke her, and if they can just change those events, she won't be broken anymore. Of course, this isn't quite as fun as her actually being able to just manipulate time, but I guess that's meant to be debated. Next, Alma sees a bunch of scenes of a potential future for her life. Her sister's wedding, her sister giving birth, her and Sam getting pregnant, having a kid, her mother's funeral, Sam's funeral, her own funeral. Her father offers her an alternative though, a life without limitations. The show is just so dense, there's so much to dissect, but it does such a great job establishing its premise and creating an intriguing mystery that keeps the audience guessing. Is Alma losing her mind? Is any of the time manipulation actually happening, or is it just a portrayal of schizophrenia setting in? As an audience audience, we're able to see the things that Alma reacts to, and her reactions make sense accordingly, but the other characters cannot see those things, so they come across as confusing or psychotic. It's a brilliant way to tell this story. Episode 3 is called Handheld Blackjack and starts with Alma confusedly wandering around her neighborhood without her hearing aid. She asks Sam if he moved around their photos on the walls, which he did when he moved out and then back in, but he lies because she still doesn't know that they ever broke up. Next, we see her explaining to the kids what happened to her. Time starts to manipulate around her and continues to disorient her, and the vision of her father tries to help her through it. He attempts to explain that her perspective of time has completely changed. She asks why she has to help him solve his death, and he explains that he's too close to the moment and that she is outside of it. He says two very important things here. One, you think I would drive recklessly into a ravine like that and leave you and your sister behind? I would never do that. And two, every time I try to get close to my own death, I get pushed away by my own trauma. To me, this actually all sounds like an accurate description of what Alma might feel about these things. When Alma thinks about what may have happened to her father, she thinks, why would he have purposely abandoned us like that? How could he have done that? And when Alma tries to learn more about his death, her mother repeatedly pushes her away. She can't get close to it. This episode makes a point to show how her work with her father negatively affects her real actual life. Next, Jacob shows Alma some events involving his work as a professor, his research assistant Farnaz, and his own research. These scenes are curious because they're filled with information that Alma theoretically should not know, so one could argue that it's a case against Alma losing her mind and actually being able to manipulate time. In order to help her function within the real world better, her father tries to help her by giving her a handheld blackjack game that's sort of a mindless, monotonous thing that can anchor her to the real world. But also, while they're in her mother's attic, they discover a newspaper article about the death of her father. This also reveals that Farnaz died in the accident as well, and Alma becomes suspicious that her father might have been having an affair with her. It's also revealed that it's now Saturday and that Alma missed 2 dates. Alma continually plays the blackjack game to help anchor her to reality, which makes her look increasingly detached from reality. She plays non-stop throughout the following workday, which understandably concerns Tunde. The end of the episode reveals that she stole everything from her mother's attic and is dissecting all of the information about her father's death. This episode really starts to lay out the specifics of the mystery at hand, while also adding a lot of fuel to the speculative fire in regard to what's happening to Alma. The show does such a good job walking the line and constantly making you question if Alma is succumbing to schizophrenia or actually experiencing time in a new way. It's what makes this show so compelling. You're constantly fed new and exciting information that allows you to further dissect and analyze and speculate, but doesn't outright give you answers. Episode 4 is called Moving the Keys and focuses on Jacob trying to teach Alma to manipulate time more precisely. It's based around getting her to move a set of keys by manipulating the time around those keys until somebody moves them. Alma's mother confronts her about stealing her stuff and her increasing detachment from reality. She helps push her to seek some psychiatric help. Alma, Sam, Becca, and Reed meet at the same bar seen earlier in the series, leading to some awkward exchanges between Becca and the bartender that she hooked up with. Sam picks up on what's happening, and the two of them agree to keep each other's secrets from Alma. Alma ends up seeing a psychiatrist who quickly explains that she thinks the blackjack device is being used to create separation from herself and the perceptions of a hostile world surrounding her. I love this detail because it's a microcosm of what makes the series so great. We get 2 explanations for the blackjack game, one from Alma's mind-bending altered perspective and one from a real-world perspective. This leaves it up to the audience to further determine which they believe more. This leads to Alma's mother snooping through her bag and finding the prescription that the doctor gave her. Alma starts having hyper-realistic dreams where her father continues to try and help her move the keys, which she does effectively now. Jacob shows Alma a memory with a man named Charlie Vanderhorn from American Freedom Corporation. This is another example of new information Alma learns through her experiences with the vision of her father, though I would argue that it's possible she's learning this information elsewhere and then filtering that information through her own thoughts and perceptions. Her father in the dream state keeps calling him Charlie Vanderhorn with a V, but we later learned that his name is Banderhorn with a B. If this was actually Jacob, he would know that it's Banderhorn, though I can't be certain how Alma would have gotten the impression that the name is Vanderhorn. We also know that Alma is reading through tons of documents pertaining to her father's research and death, so maybe that information is manifesting in these visions in ways that she'd like it to subconsciously. Next, Jacob explains her stored memories of strong feelings, and we see a bunch of important moments from her life. This cuts to Alma's mother confronting her with her antipsychotic medication, which obviously doesn't go over very well. Alma asks her mother if she knows what it's like not to be able to trust someone in your own family, and she says, "Of course I know," alluding to what we later learn about Alma's father, Jacob. The final scene of the episode repeatedly shows Alma cutting the tip of her finger while cutting carrots, and then rewinding time and trying again. She's nearly able to change these events, though ultimately she fails, but it shows that she's learning to control the abilities more precisely, and even changes the events of the past. This shoves her into into the memory of when she breaks up with Sam, which we see firsthand for the very first time. I'm going to continue to sound like a broken record, but the series is so damn good at telling its linear story in a non-linear fashion, constantly keeping the audience on their toes. Through the flashbacks, time manipulations, and memories, we learn so much about the story at hand, the time manipulation process, and all of our characters all simultaneously, yet it always keeps us guessing as to what is actually going on. This episode has probably gone the longest way so far to have us question Alma's sanity. Episode 5 picks up immediately where the previous left off, and Jacob congratulates Alma for altering the timeline before trying to show Alma important aspects of his history. He starts to show her his mother Geraldine's deterioration at the hands of schizophrenia, but Alma puts the lesson on hold to start to deal with the fact that she now remembers she broke up with Sam. When she confronts Sam, Sam thinks that Becca told Alma the truth, and he subsequently reveals that Becca cheated on Reed with the bartender. This pushes Alma into a memory of traveling to Mexico with her family when they were young, and shows Jacob trying to teach the kids about their indigenous ancestry, more hints of what we learn later in the series. Alma tells Sam to leave and continues to flash back to key moments in her life, most importantly the hospital visit when she found out that she wasn't going to be able to hear anymore. We also see Jacob looking at a brain scan of Alma, which is important for later as well. We see another memory in Mexico where a shaman suggests that Jacob's mother Geraldine may have been a shaman without knowing it, which gave him the idea to do brain scans on shamans and priestesses to see if their brains are similar to people with schizophrenia. I love how the series marries the ideas of science and mental health with religious, philosophical, and metaphysical concepts like shamans. It's an incredibly unique cross-section, and they handled it really, really well. We also get some pretty cool flashback scenes from before Alma had her surgery, and it was pretty amazing to see sign language used so prominently in the show as well. One of my favorite scenes is the first where Alma can hear again, and everything sounds like robots to her. Not only was this an eye-opening idea to witness, but it also once again helps parallel what Alma is going through in the series currently. Being able to hear things for the first time is disorienting and confusing, but only because she's never learned to process such things before. Her mind has to adapt to it. This goes right alongside her new perceptions of time, which are obviously disorienting, but become less so the more she's able to adjust to them. It's one of the major reasons I, as an audience member, continue to hope that Alma's experiences with time were genuine and not just a product of mental illness. Though maybe the idea of the show is that both can be true. We jump back to present day and Alma continues to fight with Sam about his lying, and honestly, Alma has a point. By keeping things from her, Sam made Alma feel crazy at a very difficult time in her life. But you also understand the difficulties that Sam went through in that very difficult situation. Next, we see Alma jump into Sam's memory somehow, more evidence that perhaps Alma's experiences with time and memories are genuine. Though we never quite learn if the memories she experienced actually happened, or if maybe she surmised them through small pieces of information that she already knew. Memory does work in strange ways. We see Sam say goodbye to his friends in India before they move to Chicago, which is then related to Alma's own experiences saying goodbye to her friends at her school for deaf kids. Next, we see Sam being bullied by kids at his new school who make fun of the way he speaks, which jumps to a memory of Alma's where a student knocks out her hearing aid as she goes through speech therapy and learns to speak again. This jumps to another parallel where we see Sam giving himself a sort of speech therapy to try and eliminate his accent, all in response to the bullying. I love this sequence as it shows how vastly different situations can create similar experiences for different people. As a viewer, I desperately want these memories of Sam to be real, but we might always wonder if they actually are or not. Alma's subconscious could be manifesting these types of memories to help guide her conscious self to the place that her subconscious knows it wants to go. In her heart, she wants to stay with Sam, so maybe she's manifesting these memories to further relate to him and guide herself to staying with him. Or maybe they're actual memories. But then Jacob tells Alma she shouldn't be with Sam or have any relationship while they try to explore the time manipulation. If Jacob isn't actually real, this could be representative of two sides of Alma's subconscious being at war with one another over what to do. God, there's just so much to dissect with this show. I love it. Next, we see the memory of when Alma met Sam in an incredibly adorable meet cute. It made me really appreciate their relationship dynamic. It jumped through various memories of their life together, including all of the roller coaster photos we saw earlier. Then we jump one more time to a memory of Sam visiting Alma in the hospital, showing how devastated he was. The end of the episode shows the scene that they teased in the second episode when Alma jumped forward in time significantly. Alma forgives Sam at the end of the episode, and she actually reveals to him what she's been experiencing. And as expected, it sounds absolutely insane when laid out for what it is. It really makes me think about the universe and our perception of it. We have examples in real life of how our abilities to perceive different senses can completely shift our view of the world. If the entire world was blind, but a single person could see, they would sound absolutely insane to anyone who they described the world to. But what if a person was able to perceive the universe on a new level? Would the world just write that person off as insane? The answer is probably. Episode 6 is called Prayers and Visions and starts by showing Sam and Camila separately worrying about Alma. We get a pretty cute little scene where Camila tells some kids to come back tomorrow for Easter and that the Easter Bunny will have left something for them. Sam actually does his best to try and understand what Alma is going through and starts to do research on Jacob's death himself, while Camila seeks help for Alma from her past. pastor. Her pastor asks Camila to light the candles at the Easter Vigil, and she asks him to help convince Alma to take her meds. Sam and Alma continue to investigate by checking out her father's lab and asking about the break-in that happened the night Jacob died. The security guard won't let them have any info until Alma correctly ascertains that the security guard's sister disappeared when she was young. Sam asks if she figured it out from the screensaver and photos on the security guard's desk, but Alma asserts that she experienced the woman's memories. This is a moment that stuck with me. An intuitive person probably could have guessed this based on the screensaver. We see here family photos of them together as children, and then a family photo when the woman is older without their younger sister. This photo on the desk has her sister's name, Sophia, engraved on it. While it certainly would have taken a massive level of intuition to figure this out, all of the pieces of the puzzle were there for Alma to put together. Sam keeps asking questions about Alma's new perception of time and seems genuinely interested. They discover the name of Farnaz's ex-boyfriend at the time of her death and go to his house to question them, resulting in an angry and uncomfortable confrontation. He tells them that her father was insane and to get the hell off of his property. For the second time in the episode, we see Alma talking to nobody, which we can assume is Jacob, but this obviously freaks out Sam to a degree. Becca opts to go to Reed's family's Easter service, leaving Alma and Camila to go to their own. In another uncomfortable exchange, the pastor asks Alma about her medication, and Alma kind of freaks out. Surprisingly, the pastor takes her side. The end of the episode shows Sam watching some of the religious rituals Jacob did. They also learn where to find Charles Vanderhorn, to Alma's excitement, but Sam tells them they should probably back off. Alma is obviously upset by this, and we also see that Camila bails on the Easter service the following morning after what happened with her pastor, and she looks out the front door to see the two kids from the beginning of the episode looking for the Easter eggs that aren't there. It's a pretty somber ending for the episode. Now, the first time I watched this episode, I really enjoyed it, but the second time, this was incredibly rewarding. The episode plays from Camila and Sam's perspective instead of Alma's. For the first time, we're not seeing how Alma perceives time differently now. We only see how people perceive her actions. So now when Alma talks to Jacob, it looks like she's talking to herself. When she experiences someone else's memories, we don't see it happen. We just see her intuitively come up with new information. It's fascinating and scary all at the same time. I really liked hearing the pastor defend Alma too. Camila claims she hears Alma talk to nobody, and the pastor relates that to him talking to God, and how people might perceive that as him talking to nobody. I think it continues to ask the important questions about perceptions. Many would call the pastor insane for talking to God, but Camila embraces it. Maybe Alma is experiencing something new and profound that only appears insane to those who don't understand. This feels like the most major theme of the show. It's about your truth, not universal truth. Episode 7 is called The Wedding, and as you may have guessed, it's about Becca's wedding. We immediately learn that Alma set up a meeting with Charlie Vanderhorn to get answers about her father, and quickly jump to the wedding events. Alma gives a great speech about Becca, which I truly love to listen to, and we also see that Alma is pretending to take her meds for her mother's sake, but actually isn't. Sam subtly suggests she maybe should try to take them. He expresses concern over her plan to meet with Vanderhorn, but doesn't convince her not to do it. Alma meets with Vanderhorn and does her best to coax him into telling her off the book's information. We see her father act as her conscience, telling her not to go anywhere alone with him, but she of course ignores him. Vanderhorn quickly realizes she's after something specific and tries to coax it out of her, all while the wedding party waits for Alma for wedding photos. Charlie tells Alma the work her father did was nothing and that nobody wanted it. He tells her for her own sake, she should stop looking. This is a really well written line because it can be interpreted multiple ways. That there really is nothing for her to find and that she should stop, that she'll uncover information she doesn't want to know, or that if she keeps digging, something might happen to her. Alma arrives back at the wedding photo shoot and freaks out at Becca, including yelling that she f***ed a bartender in front of everybody. This is one of the most stressful and uncomfortable scenes in the series, and to my own surprise, we see Alma rewind time and play out the events completely differently. She doesn't freak out this time, she's apologetic, she stops herself from ruining the wedding. This scene still represents my biggest hope that Alma does actually manipulate time. Becca goes missing shortly before the wedding, and Alma has a really touching conversation with her. Alma calms her down and says some really nice things, and I love this scene from a character perspective. It really highlights the importance of Alma and Becca's relationship. There's also a point where Alma witnesses a tribal ritualistic dance that seems to just entrance her, and later she talks to one of the dancers. The dance is called La Antigua, and she describes it as a dance that honors the ancestors and connects us to each other. She tells Alma that the reason they dance is to open themselves up for whatever comes next, and Alma clearly connects with this. We jump from seeing the wedding dances, to seeing the ancestral dances, to seeing Alma dancing throughout the next couple of days, including dancing with her students. As she's dancing, she sees her dad and her younger self on Halloween night in a mirror, and she dives through the mirror, ending the episode. This episode was a lot of setup for the final episode, but was filled with some really touching character moments and a couple major realizations on the time manipulation front. I truly love the moment that she changes history at Becca's wedding. It's one of my favorite scenes in the entire series, and it's only made better by the fact that I constantly debate internally if it actually happened or not. The final episode of the season is called That Halloween Night, and picks up right where the last one left off, with Alma diving through the mirror into her own memory of that Halloween night. They attempt to follow Jacob through the memory to figure out what happened to him that night. We get to the lab and learn that Camila is the one tearing up Jacob's lab. Jacob has no idea why, because she can't remember anything after leaving Alma on the street. And this is more evidence that what Alma is experiencing isn't actually real. If Jacob was actually Jacob, wouldn't he remember the following events? If he's actually a manifestation of Alma's subconscious, he wouldn't remember anything after leaving Alma. Camila thinks that Jacob took Alma to his lab to experiment on her, and even though he didn't bring her to the lab that night, it's revealed that he did do experiments on young Alma. He also reveals that his experiments were actually an attempt to go back in time himself to save his own mother, who suffered from schizophrenia. In a pretty sad scene, Camila tells Jacob not to come home ever again, and Fernaz confronts him for doing experiments on Alma without his wife's consent. She quits right in front of him and tells him she's going to report him, but Jacob convinces her to let him drive her home. And we see the dark, depressing truth that her father Jacob purposely drove off the ravine, killing himself and Fernaz. Despite this, Alma wants to go back and help Jacob change his past. They jump back to the moment he got the phone call while they were trick-or-treating, and Alma's version of Jacob jumps into his past body. He doesn't answer the phone call, and he continues trick-or-treating with Alma. Once the past is changed, Alma wakes up on the floor of the daycare with a bloodied head, and understandably, Tunde fires her, because she actually dove into that mirror. This last part of the episode is the saddest for me. I was really rooting for Alma to change the past the entire season, and I still am. But once she changes history, she appears to be more unhinged than ever before. She's convinced she has to go to the ancient cave temple in Mexico to find her father before the timelines realign, whatever that means. Sam bluntly tells Alma she's mentally ill in an incredibly sad scene, and he even calls Camila, who confronts Alma as well. Alma reveals she actually knows Camila broke into Jacob's lab, and this is another moment that keeps me holding on to hope that what Alma is experiencing is real. We have no idea how Alma could have learned these things without being there, but she knows them, and they're confirmed by Camila. Camila reveals to Alma that Jacob was also diagnosed with schizophrenia leading up to his accident. Alma ends up stealing Camila's keys and her car, and she drives to Mexico. She gets to the ancient pyramid, and she sits and waits for her father to emerge from the cave. Eventually, Becca shows up in what is another of my favorite scenes of the whole series. Alma says a couple things that so encapsulate her character, her fears, and her development over the season. She explains how when Jacob returns, history will have been rewritten, everything will change, and they won't be broken people. Alma truly attributes the events of her father's death as the thing that broke her family, broke herself. She's desperate to go back in time and change the one event that could stop herself from breaking. This, to me, is more evidence that her father has been a vision of her subconscious the entire show. Yes, he wants to solve his death, but if it were actually Jacob, he would have known the events surrounding his death. But if he's Alma's subconscious, he would have fabricated a scenario in which everything could be answered, solved, fixed. Alma is now convinced that what she's done will fix everything and completely change the timeline. Becca wakes up the next morning to Alma still waiting for Jacob, and Alma seems to have lost hope. Becca's conversation with Alma is pretty beautiful and parallels the wedding conversation the two of them had. The same way Alma was the only one who could get through to Becca at her wedding, the only person who could get through to Alma is Becca. They share a gorgeous moment together looking at their beautiful surroundings, and Becca convinces Alma to take her meds. Alma actually agrees, but asks for a few minutes alone to make sure her dad doesn't walk out of that cave. Season 1 of Undone ends with Alma sitting and looking at that cave. As the sun rises over it, the light hits her face, she squints, and she looks amazed. Intentionally vague in the best way for this series. I know it's meant to be left up for interpretation, but I think that she maybe does indeed see her dad emerge from the cave in that moment. But with that in mind, it's still meant to be questioned. She was sitting there watching it happen all by herself. Becca wasn't there anymore. So even if she did see her dad come out of the cave, did it really happen? God, what an incredible season of television. I seriously cannot say enough about how much I loved this show. I could watch it repeatedly and probably come up with new ways to dissect and analyze it every single time. And honestly, I might just do that. So the big question the show wants you to ask is, of course, is Alma's schizophrenia giving her visions, or was the time manipulation real? I'm a little bit lucky because I actually have some insight on that from the creators of the show, thanks to the panel that I saw. But I'd like to dissect it myself anyways. When I finished the series for the first time, my reaction was that Alma is schizophrenic, and that what she was experiencing was a result of that. When rewatching the series, my answer has become a little more nuanced and left a little bit more room for speculation. At the Undone panel, Raphael Bob-Waksberg said something that I loved, and that was that they wanted two people to be able to come away from the show with two vastly different interpretations of what they know the show is about. I love this so much. It explains why so much of the show was made with multiple possibilities in mind. You can make a case for multiple explanations. Co-creator Kate Purdy said something similar. I wish I had the exact quote, but if I recall correctly, she talked about how science, religion, spirituality all contain truths to people, and sometimes these truths can be different to different people. I think the show plays with the idea of truth a lot, and Kate talking about her truths helped me determine my interpretation of the show. I think it's possible that Alma is both experiencing schizophrenia and these time manipulation visions. We're given countless reasons to doubt that she's experiencing something real, but countless reasons to believe it as well. I keep going back to the blind parable. If the entire world was blind except for one person, that one person would sound insane when describing the world around them. If Alma was experiencing extrasensory abilities, she would appear insane when utilizing them. We also don't know if Alma is interpreting these extrasensory experiences properly. Ultimately, I think the show will forever leave that answer to be determined by the viewer, even if we get more seasons. I think the point of this show isn't to get hard answers about the mysteries, it's about the characters, and the events of this show give us a rich array of deep and fascinating insights into these human beings. I, of course, hope we get a second season, but I honestly can't imagine what a second season of the show would even be. Hopefully we'll find out soon if we'll be getting one, and honestly, I think we should. The show is so interesting, so fascinating. It's a truly special work of art. And until then, I'm just gonna watch and rewatch and dissect and analyze the crap out of this season. And that's where I want to pass it off to you. How did you feel about Undone? Do you have any theories about what exactly is happening? Please let me know below in the comments. And if you like this video, please make sure to comment, like, subscribe, hit that little bell so you never miss another video. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.
Johnny! Two cellos!